All right. So,
And I remember you told me something when we met
mm-hmm,
when I was pregnant, I guess with Gamblers at the time. We met at some coffee shop in Haymarket. So I
mm-hmm,
remember hearing bits and pieces, but now you can bring it all full circle.
yes. So we came here in March of 2011 to the Virginia region. We actually started out in Leesburg, and then we were in Haymarket, um, because a part of our ministry call was that we knew that Robert would be doing marketplace ministry, and I would be writing full time. That was kind of the vision that the Lord gave us, that I would be writing full time. He would be doing marketplace ministry, and then we would also be church planting during that time. So that was the vision that we came up here with. Um, the first couple of months that we came up here, because he came up through a business proposition. So we were like, okay, we know that we're supposed to leave in this particular time. We got the blessing of our spiritual leaders at the time, and they sent us up here, with a letter of, just recommendation. We're kind of old school. So, like if you come to a new region and nobody knows you, we want to have something from our previous church, saying that, hey, yes, they were elders here. They served for this amount of time. This is, the ministries and things that they were involved with. So we wound up going to Faith by meeting Crystal Brooks. We actually met her. It was like we were a couple of days new in the Gainesville region. And she at the time was working at Target. And she just was, conversation with us and asked us, hey, were you all looking for a church home or ministry? And, we knew that God was sending us to this region. We knew that we needed to connect with leadership here in the region that would understand, what we had come to do. And so we took her up on her invitation to come to Faith, and that's how we actually wound up at Faith. I don't believe that Pastor Tapscott wasn't there that Sunday, but Elder Moore had spoke. But just even the word that he was given, it was like right on point with what God was saying to us about the region. So from there, we scheduled a meeting to meet with Pastor Tapscott, and we sat down with him and we expressed to him, God's call for us to move. We knew that we were going to be planning a church, that we were going to be launching that next year, because God gave us a specific date to launch the ministry. And we actually did launch on that date, June 10th, 2012. And but in all of that, we went through, I can't even describe some of the stuff that we went through, just with persecution. The job offer that my husband had fell through. So we wound up with, no jobs, no income at the time. We wound up, living part of that time in a homeless shelter. I had to, find employment and those kinds of things. So, in all of that, we're thinking like, okay, God, like what in the world is going on? Because we have literally left everything. Like we came up here for 2 weeks based on his job proposal. We were only supposed to come initially for 2 weeks, find a place, get settled, get those things taken care of, because we had packed up our entire house, all our boxes, everything. And when we got up here those 2 weeks, everything fell through. So we were literally, we had only come up here with 2 weeks worth of anything. And we didn't have any of our like vital statistics, documentation, all of that was back at our home, packed up, because we assumed we would be back in 2 weeks to pack up our home with, U-Haul and all of that and come up here. Well, that didn't happen for another year and a half. So everything in our house just sat there in boxes, and we had to get somebody to, oversee taking care of and looking out for our materials at home while we figured out what just happened, why did the bottom just fall through, what's going on, So we're dealing with all of that. Literally, we were abandoned by the person who brought us up here. And we just now saw that same person last year from the first time that we came up here.
Wow. So this was somebody that lived up in this area that was supposed to be like a liaison to help you all transition from Florida to Virginia.
Yes. And they were also family. Yeah. So you're talking about being abandoned by the liaison, who's also your family member, winding up having to stay in a transitional shelter because we needed like immediate help, and we needed a place to stay so that I could, start to find a job in this area, using my, credentials from Florida.
Right.
So we went through that process. I was able to find a job, and then we wound up getting a place in Warrenton. It was in Warrenton that God began to speak to us about, I am setting you in this region. Because see, at that point, we were still like, should we go back? Because things have fallen through. What's going on? Lord, we need to hear from you.
Right.
Because if we're not supposed to be in this state, we're not supposed to be here, we will go back.
Right. So you've been here for 5 years, and when you say you go into ministry in the Culpeper area on June the 10th, 2012?
June 10th, 2012, we launched our first service in Bealton.
Okay.
And at that point, we were meeting in Bealton and Culpeper.
Got it.
We were having services in Bealton, and then we were having a intercessory prayer once a month in Culpeper.
Got it. So first service, Bealton, and then
Mm-hmm.
okay, got it.
And
I'm
so
the timeline for when she said it's 5 years after you've been here, 4 years after you have launched your ministry.
And so in Warrenton, I had a visitation by this spirit. And I remember I was sleeping, and then I felt something come into the room, and I looked up, and it was I didn't know it at the time. I had to go research, but it was a Confederate soldier standing at the head of my bed. And he said, "My name is Mosby." And then he said, "I own Warrenton." And I looked at him and I said, "No, you don't. Jesus owns Warrenton." And then I turned over and went back to sleep. But when I got up, I was like, okay, that freaked me out.
Right, I can imagine.
And then I started asking questions. I went to Pastor Tapscott and I said, I had this spirit, because he talked about that kind of stuff all the time.
Right.
So I figured he would understand.
Right.
And I said, I had this spirit come and address me. And I told him, that he was dressed in gray, and he said his name was Mosby. And Dr. Tapscott was kind of like taken aback, and he was like, "Oh, that's General Mosby." And come to find out, the place we were staying was literally right around the corner from his historical house in Warrenton.
Wow.
On in Old Town. And so I needed to pray against that spirit and its control over Warrenton. And as I began to go through Old Town, I started seeing, the Mosby Street. I saw the obelisk that sits in Old Town, right on the side of the courthouse there. There's a huge obelisk that's dedicated to him. So when he was saying that, he owned Warrenton, what he was saying was he was exposing his territorial control.
Right. Right.
And so I started doing some research on him, and you know how he was, you know, really racist, and the whole colonial piece with him, and how he introduced guerrilla warfare tactics into the Civil War. So we began to pray against that. And so I knew that coming here from Florida, one of the things that God told us would be our assignment would be to tackle the spirit of racism, slavery, colonialism. And so he was kind of like my first key that I was in the right place, you know, because certain spirits don't come address you unless they know you have the ability to expel them from the region.
Right.
So as I began praying into that, we found out a couple of years later that they had gotten some funding to reopen his house in Warrenton as a museum. And we began to pray against that. And I said, no, they're going to lose their funding, and God, you're going to shut it down. And certainly, I think I just heard that they do not have any more funding for that house, and so they're going to have to close it. And I said, you're going to keep it closed.
Exactly.
Because
I didn't even know that they had a museum in Warrenton with his home.
Yeah. And it's on Old Street. And I was like, no, we're shutting this down. And then there was a development where they were trying to name the development after him. And I said, God, you're going to shut that down. And they renamed the development, so it did not take on his name.
Amen.
And then the other piece, I saw a newspaper article. I think I have a copy of it because I was collecting different things during that time. But on the front page of the Warrenton newspaper I have, the Fauquier Times, I believe, it said, Gray Ghost disappears from town.
What?
Yeah, and so they do a whole thing about Mosby being the great, they call him the Gray Ghost. And so I'm experiencing all of this, and I'm like, okay, Lord, like, okay, I guess you're really, you know, solidifying what it is that we're called to do in this region. So he spells it out to us that you're going to start in Warrenton, but from Warrenton you will move from there, and I will expand what you're doing. So that's how we wound up in Culpeper, because then the Lord said, I want you to do your work. I want you to begin to build in Culpeper. So that's why we released the ministry that we were doing in Bilton, and we began to focus specifically on Culpeper. And so I began to, I started by going to the Culpeper Library there, and I began to do research on the history of Culpeper. And some things that I found out about Culpeper. Number one, they have a huge history of unsolved murders in Culpeper that are primarily connected to corruption in their police force there. So lots of.
How long ago?
We're talking back all the way back to like the 1900s. They've got lots of unsolved crime, unsolved murders that have to do with just people who have committed murder and crime there who have never been charged for it. Like people know who did it, but they've never been charged. But the other piece that really struck a nerve with me as I began to do the research was that Culpeper had a revival, very much like what is happening in West Virginia. But it was in the 1900s, and it went on. I think it said for several weeks that this revival went on, this awakening went on, and they shut down schools for the kids to attend. Like it was a huge spiritual awakening that happened, and it was two churches that were united together. But one of the ministers, basically, it was because of his ego that the revival ended. And so one of the things that the Lord was, showing me that that this was already, Culpeper is already fertile ground for revival. And so what he was sharing with us is that I'm calling you back to this place to really redig the wells of revival there.
Wow.
So that's what we have. That has been our assignment, is to redig the wells of revival in Culpeper. Since we have been there, like I said, we started out with once a month intercession, and that was because we're in the library room meeting space.
Right.
And so that was all they were willing to give us.
Right.
was one Saturday a month. You guys can have this space. And I will tell you, when we first came to Culpeper, when we start doing ministry, you know, doing open air ministry, passing out flyers and that kind of thing, the climate in Culpeper, you could still feel the racism there. To the point where, like, if I would try to approach an older white man, he would look at me and he would literally like run away in fear.
Wow, from you, a female?
Yes, yes, it was intense. But now we have definitely seen, spirit-wise as well, the breaking down of those barriers. Now, one thing we do know is there is an active Klan affiliation there in that region, like Culpeper, Rixieville area, Marshall area. There's an active. We haven't seen them, but people have told us that there are active Klansmen in the region, and so they've, you know, kind of told us to be careful.
Yeah, there's I don't know, but I heard Free State Road and Marshall, which is the road off. It's a road that runs perpendicular. Excuse me. A road that runs perpendicular to the road where my dad's house is, and it's called Free State Road. And it's I don't even know where it goes or if it dead ends or what, because it's a lot of black people live on the road, like closer to town, which is in a town called Morgantown.
Okay.
But if you keep out of Morgantown, you go on down further on Free State Road. It's been said that that's where a lot of Klansmen and Confederate racist people live, who, if you go there at night and you don't have, you know, God with you or other people or what have you, you better be careful. So, yeah. Have you been to the museum in the Plains?
I have not. And that town would actually be considered what they call a sundown town. There's a whole book on these towns that you are not to be found in after dark.
Right. Right. So they call them sundown towns.
Yep. Sundown towns. This whole book, it's a whole book on them. But so we started once a month intercessory prayer, 4th Saturdays in Culpeper. And God has just been, every year, just has been opening up more and more favor to us.
Right.
Because initially, Culpeper Library was not open on a Sunday at all. And I remember Linda, who's been coming down there with us and doing ministry, I remember her asking, would they ever open up the library again on a Sunday? And they said, never. They said, never. We're never going to open it on a Sunday. And so we just said, okay, well, we know what God said about this space. He told us to be faithful over this space, to keep praying into what he had called us to do for this region, to keep praying for the law enforcement. So we pray for all of the segments of society when we're there. And from that point, we ended from them offering us 1 Saturday to 2 Saturdays. So then we moved from 2 Saturdays to them finally opening up the library on a Sunday, which was a miracle.
So when they moved from the 1 Saturday to the 2, or they allowed the one moving from 1 Saturday to 2 Saturdays, was that you all requesting, or did they just sovereignly say, hey, you know what, we think that you guys need another Saturday, that we give you 2 Saturdays to pray?
That was a sovereign move on their part, saying, hey, we have 2 Saturdays open. So they began to give us these 2 Saturdays, and we were able to book them for the whole year. Then the next year, they finally opened up Culpeper Library on a Sunday.
Wow.
So they allowed us.
Did that happen in the last year?
Yes, they allowed us to book the entire year every Sunday.
Wow.
So,
wow.
And they gave us first option.
Wow.
So we booked every Sunday, and then, we gave them back a Saturday, because we was like, okay, if they're allowing us every Sunday, we'll keep the fourth Saturday for our intercession, and give the space back on the second Saturdays to any other, community events. So we just got a call last week asking us to book every Sunday next year.
Oh, wow.
So they just opened up for us to book every Sunday next year. And now they're giving us keys, because we were only able to hold our services when the library was open. So the library on Sundays is open 1 to 5, and so we have our services from 2 to 4, so we have time to set up and time to break down.
Right.
But now next year we'll be able to have keys to the facility on Sundays. So if we want to have our services earlier, or we want to do 2 services, or say we're holding a conference or something and we need that entire Sunday, we'll be able to do that. So God literally has been opening up favor for us in that facility.
Wow.
Because I mean, he told us, he said, you are here to build people. I don't need another church building. I need you to build people.
Right.
And if we build something, it won't be a church. It'll be a school. It'll be an orphanage. It'll be a boarding school, something along that lines. But the goal has been to build people. So we have been praying into the main specific things God has given us for Culpeper is racial reconciliation, employment for an economy building around Culpeper, coming against the spirit of colonialism, racism, imperialism, all of those isms, and praying for the leadership, those in law enforcement, those who are over, the school board, those who are over the flow of economy into Culpeper. So those have been the main areas that we've been praying in. Right. What Linda has been doing and has helped us to do is to connect with people who are also praying along those same lines in the region. So we met with a young lady about 2 weeks ago. She's a pastor there. Her name is Vivian. Can't remember her last name off the top of my head, but she was also ordained, I believe, by Pastor Tapscott. And she's getting ready to host an event, I want to say in September, at the park there. It's going to be kind of, just a prayer outdoor event for young people. So we're connecting with her on that. And then
is that where Daniel is going to be speaking? Is that time, or is it a different time? Because Linda told me at church last night that Daniel was going to be speaking at a park one weekend or something, but she told me the date. I don't remember it. So let me know if I would definitely want to come and support.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Oh, okay, it cut off for a second. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's the one, but I know there's an event happening this Saturday, and I know there's an event happening in September. So I'm not sure which one it is. But some of the things that we have been seeing, like in the past couple of years, we've been there, we've connected with a Culpeper House of Prayer run by a gentleman named Eric and his wife Tammy. They're not a part of IHOP. They just have a house of prayer there. And so we've connected with them and come in and done some intercession with them, some music with them. So they are a group who is very similar to in purpose of what God has told us to do for the region. So we've connected with them.
And Tammy and Brian.
Tammy and Eric. And you can actually find their page on Facebook. It says Culpeper House of Prayer.
Okay.
And so they have been doing nonstop prayers. I believe they do 24 hours or 12 hours sets once or twice a month. And we've been connecting with them. And the other things that we have seen that has been happening since we've been in Culpeper, we have seen more economy come, more jobs come to that region. Supernaturally, I want to say it was either 2014 or 2015, the taxes went down on the property. The property tax went down in Culpeper.
Oh, wow.
And it was the only place where the property tax actually dropped. And I think I have the newspaper article on that. Then what else happened? Oh, there was a instance, because we've also been praying about the heroin issue there. They have a heroin issue there. And there was one particular report that came out where it was 16 people had overdosed on heroin, but nobody died.
Interesting.
And the sheriff was like, we don't know what's going on. But he had to acknowledge that it was a supernatural thing happening, because they kept getting these cases of heroin overdoses, but nobody was dying.
Wow.
So that was an article that came out. But we're just excited about what we see happening. There's another thing that started happening since we've been there. Another church, Linda would have to give you the name of the church. Another church has started doing drive-by prayers in downtown.
Oh, wow. That's funny. I like that.
So they stand on the street, and I believe it's every Thursday evening, and they do drive-by prayers where people can stop, drive through. And somebody just posted that this is happening in Florida as well. There's a church there that has started doing drive-by prayer, where people can stop in, receive prayer, and keep on driving. So that started to happen.
Wow. So where do they do that, like in a church parking lot or something?
Yeah, right on Main Street going into Old Town in Culpeper. The other thing that has happened is you saw the video February. God told us, I had a dream again. I had another dream. This was, and that's why I started getting excited about this email that you sent me. In this dream, it was a graveyard, and it was all of these Confederate soldiers started rising up from their graves. They were coming out of their graves. And when I woke up from the dream, I was like, okay, God, what is this? What are you saying? And he said, I want you to begin to apostolically attack this spirit of colonialism that is trying to rear its head, especially in this region. So, because he said that, there are elements that want a civil war. They want to restart a civil war between blacks and whites in this country. And he said that because of the political tensions that are happening, you have people that are calling on their ancestors to be raised they want to take on the spirit of their ancestors to start this war.
Oh, wow.
So that's what you saw that was coming back to life again. And he said, I need you to gather some intercessors that are willing to come and meet with you about this particular spirit. The other thing he showed me was the lynching issue. And he said, you all need to pray and ask for repentance for this region concerning lynching. So I started doing some studies on the lynching in Virginia, And so in that prayer, what you will hear is you'll hear us calling out all of the places in Virginia, the cities that actually carried out lynching.
Yeah, I looked at everything that you sent me probably yesterday between 3 and 4. I watched everything in its entirety so that I could be knowledgeable, and then when it's time to pray, I can have some level of insight into what you all have been doing so that I can pray and agree in the earth with what you all are doing. So I did. I watched that, and I was trying to bring the connection between what my friend Barbara had sent in the email, the vision that she had seen, with what you all were doing, because she was talking about the 33-degree latitude and the 11-degree, and she was talking about the arrow that was like an Indian with a feather on the top, and I was like, I know you have some Native American ancestry in you, so then I was like, I wonder if this is Shantae, and then how it was saying, it's not, it's my covenant, it's not a constitution, meaning, disregard what in the earth with the constitution and let the covenant overtake that, let the covenant supersede and intervene and have the greater authority beyond what the Constitution would say. Because if you look at the Constitution, there were, issues with that as far as how the blacks and women were considered and their value when that was being enacted. So when I was looking at it, I was wondering what those implications might be, and I was like, let me watch what Shantae has done to see where the overlap is. So that's pretty much what I've been doing. And just since we left Faith, this had been at One Church Manassas, and that was just a definite temporary thing. And now we're with Pastor Annie, Pastor Gary, but I have just sensed the need for greater prayer since leaving Faith, and now being with Pastor Annie, just things that have been happening even in the culture, but before then, just the church needs to rise up. So I don't take it lightly when my intercessor friends send me something, and I definitely don't want to be outside of the Lord's will as far as what He would have me to do with the interconnection between those different people, and just in the spirit realm, how I can pray and intercede.
Amen. And I'm going to get to this because I'm actually leading up to this.
Oh, sure, no problem. I didn't say that in any way as a repeat.
Oh yeah. I'm taking in what you're saying, and it's resonating. And so here we are, we're on this road, and the road that we were praying on is actually one of the lynching roads in Culpeper. It's where they used to leave the bodies hanging.
And this was called Rixieville Road? Okay, I know what it is because I have relatives that actually live over there, which the strange thing is it's a black, my cousin, he is black, but he married a white lady, and they live off of Rixieville Road in Culpeper, I believe. And so they have biracial children that are in Culpeper County School.
So God said, I want you to go to this road, and I want you to begin to ask for forgiveness for the shed blood of those who were lynched. Ask for forgiveness, pray for those cities that participated in lynching. So it was almost like a geographical prayer point for us to be in that space and to begin to pray against it. He also had us to pray against race riots, to forbid those things from coming into the region. So it was really about using your apostolic authority to forbid certain things from coming into the region, because God says, if I've given you the authority over this territory, then use your authority.
Right. Exactly.
So that was that. And then the most recent prayer that you saw the testimony about with Linda, that was a Saturday that we were normally come, and we meet on the fourth Saturday in the meeting room. But after the meeting room, we prayed in the meeting room, and then we went prayer walking in Old Town. And what Linda was sharing was her experience of living in Culpeper, I think for like 25, 27 years, and how much revitalization has come in the last few years since we started the prayer and the intercession God is now bringing back businesses because most of Old Town had been shut down. But now when you go through there, you can see the revitalizing, you can see the new business owners coming. And when we went into the businesses, we actually went seeking out business owners to pray for our prayer walk. And we met a lot of business owners that are believers, strong believers, who have taken over those spaces in downtown.
Wow.
So that was encouraging for us because it wasn't much of a pull, you know, trying to bring the glory of God and the glory of Christ into Old Town, because those business spaces were now occupied by marketplace leaders, marketplace ministers.
Amen.
So it's very powerful. And then when we had come to Culpeper a couple of years before, we had prayed for one of the businesses on the corner, and we came back in there to meet the manager, and she remembered us from a couple of years ago when we came in to do prayer. And she was like, oh yeah, let's do this. Because she was able to testify that since that prayer, that her business had doubled. And that she had to expand business. So she bought the building next to her, and you could see the expansion of her business right there in the corner. You probably know the shop is called Pepperberries. It's like an upscale women's shop, sells like like Vera Wang bags, and now she sells Pandora jewelry. So she was able to say, yes, prayer works. Let's do it again. God, whatever you want to say this time, I'm ready. Because she saw in her own life and in her own business the expansion. So that's so when you had asked about, had we been by the train station area, that was the last time that we had been down there, was a couple months ago. And that Old Town area sits right next to the train station.
Wow, so you are steeped in this, and so sending that over to you, I'm sure it just rang off all kind of alarm bells in your spirit when you heard what she had also seen as someone from outside of the region who had come in at the voice of the Lord to prayer walk in that area. And I guess she said she did in 2015, but when I read it, I immediately thought of you because I knew that you were in the area. And then when it said that Native American piece, I also thought about you. So it was interesting that she saw body parts of the colonial soldiers, and underneath of that, she saw the imported baby parts, which to me makes it sound like just the restoration and healing that has to come with the coming together, black and white, old generation, brand new generation, just being born.
Yes.
So it's very interesting.
And the other thing that I saw in what she was, when she said the outside area was filled with body parts, torsos, legs, and arms, what she saw was the result of what had been in the region, that God has been calling us to pray into, that those, like you said, those old generations, that the bloodshed that happened, that God would forgive the bloodshed and heal the land. And I believe he's doing that. One of the pieces that we were praying into, because God told us, he said someone, an older man, he described them to us and I wrote it down. He said an older man we will come into contact with. And like I said, I don't know when, but I know that this is a promise from the Lord that someone is going to give us land in Culpeper for the purpose of healing the land. That what we establish with that land is going to bring some healing to the land. And he said it's going to be someone that the land has been in their line for generations, but they're going to give us some land so that it can atone for what happened in the region. Matter of fact, that actually just happened to a minister in Leesburg, a black minister. I forget who showed me the article, but she's a black minister, and she had been given some land in Leesburg for the same exact reason.
Wow. If you think of it, send me that, because that correlates with another dream that somebody else has sent to me about there being a connection between Leesburg and Warrenton and the churches in those two regions.
We have also been praying for abortion to stay out of the region of Culpeper, because right now Culpeper does not have an abortion clinic. They have a women's pregnancy center. So that really stirred me when I saw that about the body parts of aborted babies superimposed under the soldiers' body parts. The other piece is, I do believe that because of my Native American ancestry, that God is using that Native American ancestry to have an authority in the region as an indigenous person. So that was very powerful when she said that she saw a Native American spirit with a feather being thrust into this ground, because I know God has sent us there. When she said, "It's my covenant, not a constitution," literally, Greta, when you called, I was actually online teaching on that today.
Oh, wow.
I've been teaching on MLK's book, very, very important book called Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? And I've been doing read alouds for probably about 3 weeks now, where I teach on Facebook Live, and I'm teaching on racial reconciliation. Today I was teaching on the white supremacist ideology, where it came from, talking about the Constitution, talking about how we were an amendment to the Constitution, so we're not in the original document. We're not in the original document. And when it says all men are equal, it's not referring to us.
Wow.
Because during that time, we were only considered beasts of burden. So we were not even considered men. So it wasn't, that did not apply to us. And so, yeah, we have to go with the covenant of God, because the covenant of Christ supersedes what's in our Constitution.
Exactly.
And what I was explaining yesterday in the teaching is that if we are an amendment, that means we can be repealed. Our rights can be repealed. The rights of women and Black people in this country can be repealed.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Just like prohibition was an amendment saying it was against the law to drink alcohol, but then they came back and wrote another amendment making alcohol legal again.
Right.
So that's part of the problem with the Constitution, is that we have never become a part of permanent promises of the Constitution.
Right. That's good.
We're only an amendment.
That's good. So your days that you teach, they remain on Facebook so that somebody can go back and look at them later.
Yes. And if you type in, like if you go to the search engine on Facebook and you type in hashtag chaos or community, it'll pull up all of my videos so you can watch them. Or if you
do me a favor, text me that so that I have the right stuff and everything when we get off the phone. That way when I look, I know I'm looking in the right direction.
Okay, so let me find, I'll make sure I find a Leesburg article where woman gets land. I'll look that up for you. And then chaos or community. And also the hashtag why we can't wait. Because I've been reading MLK's work because they are so timely for what we're dealing with right now in 2016. It's almost literally like he just wrote it yesterday and he's talking about what we're living out today. When she said, I heard and saw trains coming fast, and started to say the 11, the 11, the 11, the 11, that struck a chord in me because I was born in the 11th month. And 11 has always been a significant number for me. in terms of, for me, it means incompleteness and that something needs to be completed. And then recently, last month, God just out of the blue told me to start studying the 33rd degree latitudinal line.
Wow.
So I have notes on the 33rd degree latitudinal line. And like she said, there are so many things that cross that line. And I'm like, God, why have we not been praying into this as believers?
Right.
And it's very, very eerie, the number of things that cross that line. So I actually have been praying into that. And then when she began to talk about Ezekiel 37 and the great army of God, that's something that we've been also praying into, about the awakening of the saints, especially in our region in Culpeper. And we've been praying that the saints would awaken and arise. One of the things that God showed us was he showed us, it's called tsunami. It was a word of the Lord that he gave. And I'm gonna pull it up here, called tsunami is near. Let me see if it'll pull it up for me. I'm looking on my computer, and I want to read it to you because it has to do with the part that intercessors all over are playing. There it is. The spiritual tsunami is near. And this was a word he gave to me March 22nd, 2016. And it says, nobody, no movement, no denomination, no elitist group will be taking credit for the next move of God in America. It will be a spiritual tsunami. God will use the energy that flows through many obedient apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, teachers, intercessors, reconcilers, and disciples. Like underwater volcanoes, God will use the synchronized energy of the saints to cause the tectonic shifts that take place unseen in prayer closets, prayer chambers, prayer rooms, prayer conferences, to produce the energy for the largest wave of repentance to hit the shores of America, from Washington to Washington, coast to coast. And then he said, little waves are pushing the next 3 years, and the saints are being shifted geographically to get in place for your volcanic prayer to be released in the right regions. This is God's doing, and all glory will go to him alone. And then what I did was I embedded a video of how tsunamis work, because what you could see underneath was, you could see all of these little volcanic reactions happening underneath that causes the tsunami to form, that then pushes in and floods an area. So that's what God was showing, is that, you know, if you are faithful in whatever region that God has called you to, and you're faithful in that intercession, in that prayer, in that place of your volcano, of what you're called to do to shake up your region, it's going to converge.
Amen.
It's going to converge. And so a part of our unity is not just in everybody coming to one big spot, but it's also everybody being consistent in their place of obedience.
Right. Amen.
You know, to do what God has called you to do. So that is what I have. And this is just very, very, very encouraging to me. I know we're going to go back out to where the train depot area is, because one of the things that God had been dealing with us about is going to spaces where lynching has occurred and praying into those spaces. And And then the last piece she had here about Jeremiah 33:11, God gave me a prophetic song about the bride and the bridegroom, that he is mending us together. And I believe I put that on my YouTube channel, but I have to go back and look.
Okay.
But he began, the voice of the bridegroom and the bride, and he began singing over us in one of our recent services about him mending us together. So this is very encouraging in a lot of ways. And like I said, that whole piece about the arrow in the Native American, I really believe that God is using us, to be the fourth strike in the region, and just connecting with people who are doing the same thing, who believe the same thing, and just want to see God awaken the region. And we believe that it is near.
Amen.
So yeah, even with what's happening in West Virginia, that was exciting to us. We were like, Lord, bring it right on over the mountain.
Exactly. Wow, well, that's awesome. So you got me to where things are now. So you all were in Warrenton, I guess, but now, because you all had an office space over maybe east, west, Shirley Pike, somewhere in Warrenton, because I remember not too long ago, maybe a year or 2 years ago, you all had been in Warrenton. Have you since you moved from your Warrenton location to Maryland, and you are those placed there? You still travel out to Culpeper, you travel out to Warrenton?
Yes, we are. Like I said, as we stayed obedient in the assignment in Culpeper, God supernaturally opened up a business opportunity for Robert to go back into his profession as an architect.
Awesome.
And so that has been an amazing thing, because that actually ties into our prophetic destiny with the nation of Israel. I had a vision when I was 17, even before I married Robert, that my husband would be connected to the Jewish nation, and that we would be somehow or another, that we would be a part of the rebuilding process for Israel and for Jerusalem. So I've always had a heart for the Jewish nation, Jewish people. I've taken courses, gone to synagogue, studied the culture of it. I have several close friends who are Jews. They're not Messianic, but they are, Ashkenazi European Jews. And so the way that this came about, we had moved from Warrenton to Woodbridge, and at the time I was still working at Fauquier, still dealing with the race there, and praying for God to get me out of it. Because I was like, Lord, we're doing ministry, we're doing things full time, and literally the work environment there was getting to the point where it was literally taxing on my body. And I had gotten to the place where I had developed tendonitis in both of my wrists.
Wow.
And so it was to the point where I couldn't even do the job they were asking me to do, because I had braces on both of my wrists.
Wow.
So, at the time I was serving as an assistant teacher / librarian assistant. So I had a lot of stuff to do in terms of, lifting stuff, shelving stuff. It wasn't so much the typing issue, but it was more the physical labor piece that was really starting to tax my body. And so I gotten to the point where I'm literally in double braces. I can't even drive to work. And so I was like, okay, God, like something has to give here.
Right.
And at that time, Robert had been, continually applying for architecture firms here in the region. He hadn't gotten any response back since we had come in 2011. And he got a call from a vendor who sold a software that he is very good at and very skilled at.
Well, Robert is skilled at with that particular software.
For architecture. And so this vendor called him and said, hey, there's a firm that may need you to do, you know, some minor, you know, independent contractual work that you may want to look into. They're looking for someone who knows how to operate this software because very few people in this region are good at this software.
Wow.
So Robert calls them, asks, you know, about, you know, what they need. So he's thinking it's going to be a temporary independent contract deal, maybe a couple of months work on a job, and that's it.
Right.
So he calls, and then he sends them his resume, and then they call him in for an interview. And turns out that they want to hire him permanently.
Wow.
So it was really a fluke of just the right pieces connecting at the right time. It was a door open, and turns out that this firm is the #1 architecture firm in the country for designing churches and synagogues.
What? Are you serious?
I'm serious.
That's crazy.
And the partners are they are Orthodox Jews.
That is amazing.
So yeah, so it's a Jewish firm and very well known around the country, and they just hired him on the spot.
That is awesome. So it's in Maryland, so that's why y'all are there, because it's closer to your job.
Yes.
Amen.
So we moved to Maryland, and it's amazing because I was able to, you know, resign from the place I was at that was literally breaking my body down.
Right.
And I had to actually go back into therapy, and I did about 6 months where I couldn't do anything but just pray and intercede and bless God. So you know, we continue with ministry in Culpeper because our thing is like, we know that as long as we stay on mission, God will continue to bless us and continue to provide for us to do what we do in Culpeper. So for us, driving every weekend 2.5 hours to go do ministry is not a big deal because God made the way for us to do that. So now I'm working full-time with my editing, my publishing, with my books, my music. You know, I just finished a music project in March, and so that's going really well. And it's funny because here it is 5 years later, and we are doing what God told us we would do when we first came to the region.
Wow.
So it's a full circle for us. And, you know, looking back on it, it's like certain things we had to go through because God was like, I have to show you what is in this region. I have to show you the underbelly of this region. You know, if we would have come in like we were previously, you know, making 6 figures, you know, having our home and our cars and da 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 da. He was like, you would have only encountered a certain kind of people because you would have already been at a economic level that you would have only encountered a certain kind of people. But because you came here and I stripped you, you got a chance to see the underbelly of Virginia. You got a chance to see the poverty. You got a chance to see how people treat you when you don't have anything. You got a chance to see the inequity even in like the welfare system when you're going to try to get help. And people tell you things like, literally one lady told me flat out, she said, A white woman with children will always be helped before you.
Ugh. That's crazy. This was in Culpeper or this was in Warrenton?
This was in Warrenton.
What?
She just flat out said, listen, you know, you all are a Black married couple, and we don't give that much assistance to married people, first of all. And then she said, secondly, a single white mother will always be helped before you in this county.
Wow.
So we got a chance to see the attitudes, the racial disparity, you know, basically the things that we would need to intercede for.
Wow.
And be able to say to those that we help and those that we serve, we have been and seen the underbelly of what you're dealing with.
Wow.
So here's how we can help you, and here's how to get out, and here's some resources that you can go to that's going to help you be able to move forward in your life.
Right.
So
wow.
we wouldn't have had, you know, we wouldn't have had that experience had we not gone through the process that we went through. And it's interesting because in 2008 was when God first told us about the call to pastor. We were still in Florida. From 2008, at that point, and I journaled everything, the Lord told us, begin to prepare to leave. Begin to prepare your heart, prepare your mind to leave Florida. Study the pastors in this region, study them in their pastorate, learn what to do, learn what not to do, write it down, write down your lessons. And then every year leading up to us leaving Florida, he took us on a 40-day fast as a family, and he made us study Joseph. So every year we had intense studies of Genesis 37 through 50. Like he would not let us get off of that subject. And living here, we now understand why. Because had we not studied Joseph, we would have probably been on the 6 o'clock news a lot of times. I'm just saying, because of some of the things we went through, the attitudes of people, just craziness, utter craziness. And I have to say this, you know, it was not unsaved people that put us in pits. All of them were Christians.
Wow.
So had we not had the foundation of Joseph in our heart and in our spirit and in our life to understand that God is putting us through a process, that yes, we're being betrayed, yes, we're losing some things, but at the end of this, God is going to set us in the place that we need to be. We know that he put us in this region. We trust God's mind toward us, even if we cannot trace his hands.
Wow. Wow.
So we had to be of that mindset.
Right.
And the most important thing for us now is learning that even at the end of Joseph's life, that Joseph had to, in order for him to be what we call apostles of grain, because that's what we believe God is raising up. He's raising up apostles of grain.
Oh, apostles of grain. Got it. Okay.
So he's raising up in this hour, he's giving wealth, and he's raising up people who know what to do with the wealth, number one, who won't be selfish in their distribution, number two, and who are able to forgive and move on. Because that's what we had to do. In a lot of circumstances, we literally had to just say, God, I forgive them. I'm moving forward. I'm moving on. I refuse to hold a grudge because I know what you have for us in the future.
Right.
And I look at the life of Joseph and I tell people often, God cannot trust you with the level of wealth that Joseph had if Joseph was not even willing to give his own family bread.
Amen.
And so many people want wealth, but God is like, you won't even feed your own family members. Why would I give that to you?
Exactly.
Like, why would I give you the responsibility over a nation of people when I can't even trust you to feed 12?
Right. who had wronged them, who had done him harm.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, I have enjoyed talking to you. I know that you're recording it, so I did want to pray.
Yes.
Did you want to stop the recording so that we can pray together?
Yes. Let me stop my recording.